Hello, everybody. Welcome to the InduSoft and Veckoff webinar covering OPC UA. We'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Hopefully you get some stuff out of this, get some information, get some ideas on just how OPC UA could be useful for you and or InduSoft and or Veckoff. So let's go ahead and get started. The agenda today, myself, Scott Courtier, Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft. I'm going to present some OPC UA information and just how it's used within InduSoft Web Studio. Give you a quick demo and talk about some additional resources, how you can find more information available from InduSoft. Then we're going to hand it over to Mr. Bob Trask from Veckoff, who's going to give you a great presentation on OPC UA and hit some really good points on that. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. And for those of you who have not joined us before, or those of you who have and don't remember this, on this type of webinar, we cannot hear you. So if you have any questions, comments, ideas, or suggestions, please feel free to put those into the chat window or the Q&A panel in your WebEx interface. We'll try to get to some of those during the webinar itself. But if we can't, we'll certainly answer those at the end as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Also, some logistics. Other than we can't hear you, we will be recording this and posting the recording as well as the slideshow within a couple of days of the presentation. So you should be receiving an email let you know where that is. Or you can always come to our website and search that out and find it. And also we'll be sending out a survey. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what other types of information you'd like to see. And we'd like to, we do these for you guys. And I'd like to give you some good information and understand how to use our products and interfaces. And also, if you give us your name, address, and your shirt size, we're going to send you a free t-shirt just for joining us today. So there's the logistics out of the way. Talking now about OPC and OPC UA. If you didn't know, InduSoft Web Studio was one of, if not the first, OPC UA client to go through the certification lab at the OPC Foundation and pass. We are actually certified for OPC UA. We attend these interoperability workshops that the OPC Foundation has all over the world, really. And what that is we get in the room with a bunch of other people that can talk OPC UA, and we connect clients to servers, and we test out the specification for OPC, and we make sure that we can all communicate with each other and using the specification, and we always find something, and this just improves OPC in general and our product in general, and it really helps out. What I'd like to now do is move on to the next slide and talk about OPC InduSoft Web Studio communication and connectivity. I'm going to get into a few of these other topics in a little bit, but you can think of OPC like a translator, and I'm going to show you a slide about that in just a bit. Regarding connectivity, when most people think of InduSoft Web Studio, and you can in this diagram, you can see that it is kind of in the middle of all this stuff or on the outside edge. And that's really representing not only InduSoft Web Studio, but the kind of the tags database at the core of this. And usually when InduSoft Web Studio communicates with a device, a PLC, a temperature controller, motion controller, whatever that device might be, we use one of our built-in over 240 included drivers. And that's been one of the strengths of InduSoft Web Studio for years, is the fact that we can use these built-in drivers. They're included with the product, and you don't need any external servers to communicate. But we certainly have realized that we don't have all the drivers to everything. We have a lot, an awful lot. But sometimes it's necessary to go to some other devices where maybe we don't have drivers. And that's where, with InduSoft, we have some real strengths in the fact that we have connectivity through OPC DA, which the OPC Foundation now calls OPC Classic. We now have OPC UA, which we're going to be covering in this webinar. We also have the .NET version and the XML version for clients. And in the next slide, you're going to see how the client versus the server is working. And we can also tie information through the web. We can also get information through a TCP/IP worksheet. We also have an OPC server as opposed to a client where we might talk to somebody else's third-party server. We can be the server, and other clients can come and get information from our tags database. We can communicate through databases, really anything that's SQL based, so we can get at Microsoft Access, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, FoxPro, Oracle, you name it. Lots of historians. Pi has a OSI historian, things of that nature. And then we also have some toolkits that will let you get at drivers and other ways to get into our tag database. Some interesting strengths about this, the way that this diagram is showing our product, is that we can use InduSoft Web Studio not only to have multiple protocols talking over our built-in drivers and maybe sharing information from one brand of PLC to another brand of PLC, but we could also get information from a driver, from a PLC, and maybe put it into a PLC, a different PLC via OPC, or get information from OPC and send it to a database. And notice that this is not one direction, this is bidirectional. We can get information from a database and send it to an OPC-enabled device. So lots of different ways to get communication in and out of InduSoft and share that information as it relates to this webinar with OPC UA. On the next diagram, if you were to use InduSoft Web Studio in kind of the way that we've actively promoted it would be with InduSoft Web Studio. Let's see if I can grab a little marker here and draw this. If you have let's say in this case, an industrial PC running InduSoft Web Studio, you could connect up to a PLC via our direct drivers and communicate directly to that. But let's say that you wanted to use a feature that our driver didn't support, or maybe you wanted to go to a PLC or a device that we didn't have a driver for. What would you do then? Well, the answer is you would then be able to use something like an OPC server, where you might have the OPC server. Now, when I talk about an OPC server, that's a piece of software. That's not a physical, like rack-mounted computer. No, that's a piece of software. And in this case, InduSoft Web Studio would be the client. Now, we, again, have support for OPC DA, UA.NET, and XML as clients. What we're talking about in this webinar really is UA. And if you look at it in this circumstance, OPC server is kind of like a translator, where maybe we speak English to the translator, and then the translator would speak another language on the other side. In this case, we're speaking OPC to the server, and it's speaking the proprietary communications, whatever protocol that PLC supports. We don't necessarily need to know what it is on that other side, nor do we care. Of course we care, but the information that the communications that happens on the other side is kind of transparent to us. We only speak OPC to the server, and it handles the communications on the other side. Much like if you were speaking to a translator and you only spoke English, maybe you would speak to the translator in English, and he or she would speak English or French or German or Portuguese on the other side. So that's kind of the idea of what OPC is. And as you'll see in Bob's presentation, it really can be much, much more than that. I'm trying to oversimplify it to make sure that everybody gets the concept and the idea. I spoke in that other diagram about gateway functionality. We can really complement other communications technologies, especially using OPC UA. And we can really use InduSoft Web Studio as a gateway to other communication standards. But really, when you think about if you have an OPC server communicating to something like a PLC, a temperature controller, or another device, this idea really starts to bring in the concept that everybody's talking about, the Internet of Things, where you might have these endpoint devices that are out there collecting data, doing some simple interfacing, and then getting that information up to where it can be analyzed. And InduSoft is making a huge push in the near future to really enable these Internet of Things type devices. We have numerous thousands of installations where customers are already using embedded architectures, whether it be Windows CE or embedded XP or an embedded standard 7 Windows operating system. They're doing things like this with embedded devices, doing data collection and sending that up, whether it be to a server, to the cloud, and using, in this case, an OPC server can really help facilitate that. Now, I have here in the slide that you can keep existing infrastructure. Well, let's say that you don't have this type of situation just yet. Maybe you've had an InduSoft runtime on a PC here for years, and you've enabled that to communicate to a database, and or using our built-in PLC drivers, you can communicate to whatever PLCs you would like to. Now, through this OPC, this defined standard put up by the OPC Foundation, we can communicate to that OPC server and keep the existing architecture in place, whether it be the cabling, the PLCs, the network, whatever the case may be. Keep that in place and just add to it, enhance what you have. You don't necessarily have to tear out and start over from scratch, although you certainly can. And then in addition to that, we also support some different thin client architectures, and now you can get remote access via HTML5, which could be on an iPad, an Android phone or tablet, or a Chrome web browser, Internet Explorer, for example, and do things remotely. So that really kind of brings this almost full circle to allow these endpoint devices to get information up into a cloud, into a server, and so we're really enhancing what the Internet of Things is bringing to the market. So I'm going to do a quick demo here, but before we get started with OPC UA, we have this ability to browse to the server, and you'll see this a little bit in Bob's presentation. He's going to show you the tree view, that the idea that I'm going to show. We can set up and trigger reads and writes based on synchronous or asynchronous type scans. We can get some information coming back from that. We have this concept of connections, and I'll show you what that is. Basically, you set up and name a connection before you use it, and then it really helps facilitate the way that you can configure this and use it throughout your InduSoft Web Studio project. Very important is we support security, both with encryption and with certificates, and we've got some really good webinars and application notes on how to be able to do that, or at least information in the manuals and, again, webinars. And not only is OPC UA available in InduSoft Web Studio for desktop and server type operating systems, meaning like, for example, Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, and server editions, but we can also have OPC UA. We have a client also for Windows CE in version 7.1. So for those of you who are looking for that, we have that available too. I'm going to come back to this slide in just a minute, but before we do that, what I'm going to do is bring our InduSoft Web Studio development environment in here, and I'm going to demonstrate how to communicate to an OPC server, just how easy that is to set up. Now, I happen to have the OPC Foundation sample server running on my laptop. That server, because it's OPC UA, and you'll hear this from Bob, is that does not have to run on a Windows environment like the old OPC Classic used to have to. It can run on a multi-platform operating system, but I just happen to have that in my laptop here, so you'll see that in just a second. What I'm going to do is start over from scratch. I'm going to create a brand new project, and it's going to warn me, because I already have a project named project, it's going to warn me that I'm going to overwrite that. I'm fine with that. I'm going to create this in my native resolution here, and it's going to create this brand new project with no screens in it, no communications. And what I'm going to do now is go in here to the communications section, and you can see that we have all these different OPC clients, and I'm going to drop into the OPC UA and right-click on connections here and insert a new connection. Now here I'm going to give it a name of my OPC UA, and that's going to be the name that I'm going to reference this configuration. Now if I have other OPC servers or other ways that I want to communicate to that same server, I could give it different connection settings and then name it differently and communicate with that differently. I can also go in here and look at security and set up. You can see where we have the certificate generation capabilities and enabling that. have some ability to test this connection at this point, I need to be able to know how to get to this connection here. Well, this connection, I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'm going to use what's called a discovery server. Now, this discovery server happens to be on my PC, and what it's doing is going out and looking for all the different OPC UA servers that are out there. In this case, I just happen to have one, which is the sample server provided by the OPC Foundation. I'm going to select that, and then I'll go ahead and put that endpoint string in there. And I'm not going to use security for this example, but now I should be able to test my connection, and I should be able to click on OK and save that. Now I have that named connection in here, which is my OPC UA. I just happened to make that up. The name is your choice to put in there. But now I have this name here, and I could go back up to OPC UA and right-click and insert a worksheet here. Now I can put in a description, but that's not really used for anything other than your comments or your documentation, if you will. But what I'm going to do is choose this connection. Now this is going to give me the list of named connections that I've created. In this case, I only have one in here. And I could put tags into the different status and disable fields and whatnot, but for this case, I don't need to do that. And I'm going to create a brand new tag within InduSoft Web Studio. Let's call it temperature, because I don't have that, and it's going to prompt me, and I have the choice of making that a Boolean, an integer, a real, or a string. For this example, I'm going to use integer because that makes sense for a temperature. And I'm going to go into this field here, and now we've already established communications with that OPC UA server. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click and browse to that server. Now you're going to see somewhat of a representation of this in Bob's presentation, but here's the kind of the live view of it. This comes from the server itself. InduSoft doesn't really generate this. This comes from the OPC server itself. So I'm going to drill into this tree view, if you will. In this case, they have some sample data provided here, some demonstration data. And I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to go dynamic data, scalar data, and I'm just going to happen to choose an unsigned 16-bit value. I know that's going to give me a decent value to display on the screen. So now that's how I've tied this item name. Item is what OPC calls essentially tag names. So I've tied this OPC item name to this InduSoft tag name via this connection, which we set up a few minutes ago. I should be able to save this as sheet number 1. And now I can go on my screen here. Now this is under the graphics tab, and I'm going to insert a new screen. And to make this kind of easy to see, what I'm going to do is create a bar graph here. To do that, I'm going to put a rectangle on the screen and apply a bar graph animation to it. I'm going to double click on it and tie it to that tag called temperature. And I know that unsigned 16-bit integer value happens to have a value that goes between 0 and 100,000. And what I'll do is I'll also put a piece of text down here so we can see that number. And give myself a number of digits here to display. And I'll apply a text data link animation to that. Also tie that to the tag called temperature. I don't need to input enable that, so that'll display the value. This will display the bar graph. And at this point, I can go ahead and save this screen. We'll call it main. And we'll tell this to make this the startup screen that starts up when I run. And now I should be able to run this application, which will start the OPC client connection in the background to the server. The information will be passed back and forth, and then we should here in a couple of seconds, there we go, see the information coming from that demonstration value in the sample server. So you can see that just happens to be updating. I think that update rate was set at once per second, but you can see really how easy that was to get that connection going to the server and configure the data on the screen. So that's about all I wanted to demo before I hand things over to Bob. But before I do, what I wanted to mention is that we have a few different webinars that we've given on OPC. Earlier this year, we did one with Mr. Tom Burke, the president of OPC Foundation, and got some really good information from him on where the OPC Foundation is going. And we also did a presentation with Software Toolbox, and if you're not familiar with them, they have an online store that has a lot of HMI and SCADA information or products available, such as ActiveX and .NET objects, symbol factories, and as well as OPC servers. So we also have our online training videos. If you want some more information on how to use OPC UA, you can always take a look at those. And I wanted to show a quick demo of our PACML sample application. You can get this at this address. And again, you don't have to write these down because these slides will be posted on our website just in the next couple of days or so. Real brief, what I wanted to do is open up this PACML template that we have. Now, PACML basically is the way that packaging machines are able to communicate with each other using a standardized common language and terminology so that everybody's using the same information in the same way. And if we have this demo, what I can do is I can put this in automatic mode, turn off the e-stop, and you're going to see this state machine here, and I can get things going here. And ultimately, what we want to have is have this thing started and sitting in this producing parts section here where I'm at right now. And if something goes wrong, we can put it into a holding pattern, put it into a suspended pattern, and then once everything is maybe done producing parts, at the end of the day, we can stop it or cycle stop and have this thing go back through its standard way of doing things. So this is a template that we have free on our website, and just wanted to show you this. We were at PAC Expo last week and saw a surprising amount of this available at the packaging show on different screens in the show. So I just wanted to briefly show you that. And that could use OPC UA to communicate to the different devices in there. That's certainly one way to do that. So what we're going to do is bring Bob online here.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much for this opportunity and a great lead-in. My name is Bob Trask. I am a systems architect with Beckhoff, and with Beckhoff for 12 years as an employee and was a customer for 4 or 5 years before that. And the company has always impressed me with its ability to kind of see trends and to enable those trends, to help those trends, to guide them along. And we're right at the beginning of a real big trend, and we're seeing OPC UA, as Scott showed us, from a machine-to-machine thing. But this presentation is going to talk about, okay, what about Industry 4.0? What about Internet of Things? How can we, is OPC a viable candidate to enable all that? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So our agenda for the next half hour is we're going to real quickly, okay, Internet of Things versus Industry 4.0. Are they the same thing? What's similar about them? What's different? Some real quick basics about OPC Unified Architecture. And we heard already that we for years we had this thing called OPC quote-unquote Classic or OPC DA. And when I first bumped into OPC, that was what I used. And at the late 90s and early 2000s, it solved a lot of problems. It was somewhat straddled because it was tied to a Windows platform. And I kind of had that in my head as I started hearing about UA. And I had some advice from a colleague, Stefan Hoppe, who also happens to be the president of OPC in Europe. And he sat me down and he said, Bob, do me a favor, just forget everything you ever knew about OPC Classic and look at it afresh. And I did do that, and wow, I was actually blown away. And the possibilities for what UA can bring to the table are amazing. So why OPC UA? When people come up and say, okay, give me a one-sentence description of OPC UA, my answer is it is a safe, reliable, manufacturer-independent, platform-independent communications protocol between devices. And devices is a loaded word. Could be between two PLCs, could be between HMI and a PC. But it really opens it up after that because we're seeing the cloud and a bunch of other things come in there. It's highly object-oriented, and that makes our life easy. As Scott pointed out, we can drill down and get temperature. It also, interestingly, can be arranged in a service-oriented architecture. This is a term that's been around for a long time, and it's easy to dismiss, but what's important to remember is this is the way the web runs, and we know how well that works. And I'll end with a couple of slides for some more information. So this is a cover of a brochure that I'll show you a link how to get to later. Fantastic brochure, a lot of effort went into it. And each of those pictures in the circle there are important, starting with the lime green. That's an integrated circuit. So one of the things that's interesting about OPC UA is it can be deployed on a very small footprint, i.e. a sensor. It can be deployed in a chip, put on a sensor, low power, low footprint, full OPC server. Scale that up to a mainframe kind of server, still can be deployed. Cell phone, it can exist there. Any PLC, basically, that chooses to implement an OPC server, which you do not have to be a member of OPC Foundation to use OPC, and that's different from Classic too. Laptops, of course, but it also works top to bottom in the factory, and that's where it was born, and that's where it grew up, and it's so well designed that we're seeing extended out of that. Of course, with tablets now, the cloud has become an interesting component of all of this. We're seeing the cloud being the go-between to, if I want to talk to a PC, with my cell phone, for example, it actually is much easier to have those point to a cloud point and handle things that way. So we're seeing cloud-based communications become more and more prevalent. Okay, IoT versus Industry 4.0. What are those? So Internet of Things, we hear this, we're getting bombarded daily with IoT, and I myself have been caught in this. I'm like, wow, is this a bunch of hype? Is this just a fad? And some of the things I'm seeing, for example, like at PAC Expo last week that Scott was talking about, it is not a fad. It is absolutely a complete and total game changer for the automation world. The techniques that are being used there in consumer land are converging. There's been a continual convergence with what goes on in consumer and IT world that works. We eventually incorporated automation world, and we're seeing that convergence here. So that the important part of that statement there is the last part, Internet-style networks. That's that SOA. We're seeing this, not a real time. We have field buses for that, but for everything else, OPC UA fits in perfect. So IoT, the premise behind it is really everything talking to a cloud. A couple of months ago, I was at a conference at Microsoft, and two senior vice presidents, people that answer and work directly for Satya, the CEO, both said at two different instances, we are banking everything on the cloud. And for a company of the magnitude of Microsoft to be so bold and say something, that should make you sit back and say, wow, what's going on? So the concept is right here with IoT. For industrial land, our needs are a little bit different, but still the concepts are there. And we need to do a plant floor between controllers communication, but the Internet of Things, the Industry 4.0 requires that top to bottom kind of communication. And okay, unified architecture, basics and modeling. So in any connected type of plant, we see this kind of pyramidal thing where we have a main ERP and then another level and then down to the plant floor, and there's really even another level of that for sensors because, a large part of IoT is saying, okay, I want sensors to talk directly to the top, and OPC, because it's meshable, can do that. So what we need is something secure, reliable, and scalable, and that is exactly what OPC provides for us. There is an encryption technology which is exactly the same as when you log on to your bank. It's an acknowledged protocol very similar to TCP/IP, and it can be deployed very small or very large. The big thing is it's not dependent on Microsoft anymore, not dependent on Windows. There are 3 stacks, as they're called, one written in ANSI C, one written in Java, and a .NET component, and these can be used on any platform and use the stack. And the stack contains everything, the whole mechanism, the security and the discovery that Scott showed us, and a historical thing, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And it really is a relatively small, it's 37 things, which sounds like a lot, but it's really a small, manageable set of services. And yes, it all this was born and grew up in automation and takes all of the concerns that we have and wraps that in there. The information model is rich, it's object-oriented, and it's easily extended. One of the, last week I was at a IoT West, a conference, and was talking to the Industrial Internet Consortium chairperson. He's like, yeah, OPC is great, but it's missing location information. Location information is very important to us for sensors. A little thing that says, okay, I'm here at this point in the plant. I'm like, no problem. That OPC is so extendable, you can have that information put in there. Like the server configuration Scott showed us, you just add a location field. So what concerns me is that a couple of these organizations are just now beginning, whereas OPC has been around for a while and has really stood the test of time already. Mesh networks. So if we look over to the right, we see kind of an interconnected thing. So you do not have to have a direct connection between A and B to get information between A and B. It can be hooked through things, and that the discovery, the tree structure enables you to kind of to get through that, to navigate through that to get information. And we're already seeing information models, which are kind of use cases of design pattern. PLC Open has released a set of blocks to manage this. BACnet for building systems, and MT Connect, Machine Tool Connect, has a suite of tools. So OPC UA stands for these 4 pillars right here. Data modeling, okay? What is my data, including metadata? So we looked at a temperature on an example. Wouldn't it be great if I can say, okay, you're in Celsius or you're in Fahrenheit. Those are your units. Here's your maximum, here's your minimum that I can allow. And any other data can be tied to that. So we're not just necessarily transferring the data, we're transferring metadata with it. So you have this very flexible, very rich data modeling. It provides the transport, the communication. The security is built in. And I can't overestimate how important that is, because we do not have to be security experts. We do not have to hire a security consultant. These tools are in there. It is a checkbox to say, yes, I want to use encryption. It's that easy. So we don't need to worry about, gosh, now I have to be a security expert too. Collaboration. They've done a great job. The OPC Foundation has done a great job of involving academia, involving OEMs, involving end users. Big example is Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble loves OPC UA. And, of course, vendors like InduSoft and Backoff, who are providing the tools to make all this happen. So we're seeing all these things help shape it, and they're also saying, yes, we feel that this is the mechanism for the next generation, the fourth industrial revolution. That's what Industry 4.0 is, where we're entering the fourth industrial revolution. And we're seeing new applications for it. I've recently been involved with an oil platform, so OPC UA is being used there. A few months ago, was involved with the municipal water system, and OPC UA, they needed an encryption technique, and they weren't security experts either, so they deployed OPC UA to do their SCADA, and it took care of those concerns for them. So there's a base information model. When people design a server or deploy a server, it's most of the time going to be a subset of that, so the information model is big and vast. I don't need all those things. I need a piece of it. And even more specific, okay, I'm sending out this gas analyzer. Okay, these are the OPC fields that I'm concerned about, or 1131. These are the specific things. The good news for this, these are released, these are active products, and are in the world and doing a great job. A common use case for us, for our industry on the lower level, is to have the control, and as Scott showed us, to pass the relevant information to an OPC client or server. And we're seeing those married together, both client and server deployed on the same device. And there's some advantage to that as far as a service-oriented architecture. And once we do that, we saw a similar slide a little while ago. Now I have mechanisms to talk to MES systems. I can talk to visualization from InduSoft or anybody that chooses to use OPC UA. Any other PLCs, maybe an RFID reader or a barcode scanner, all that stuff that's really not time deterministic can be wrapped into the UA, to the Unified Architecture Blanket. And the benefit of that is this secured semantic interruptibility. So what does semantic mean? Semantic means useful names. Temperature on tank 2, not, T_2, $, something that, what the heck is that? Then I need another document to kind of translate that. No. Semantic, we're pushing real useful names for things. Okay, why OPC UA? No bones about it. Nothing's going to help us in the world unless it saves somebody money. That's just the way things are. We all know that. And the big thing is security. At least half the people I'm talking to that are interested in OPC UA are really looking for a secure mechanism to transfer data and not have to be a security expert. And that's done, that's there, and we can now rest easy. Off request was the metadata, like we talked about. Do I want to transmit this data structure, and it's got lots of fields and lots of things in there? Done. It's not proprietary. So if there's any way that Industry 4.0, any way that Internet thing is going to work, it cannot be dependent on a single vendor. It just can't. I don't know how great or wonderful, how large that vendor is. It cannot be dependent on a single vendor. So we need a standard. We have to have a standard. There's no other way for it to work. And UA fits that bill for us. And the standardization of this data communication reduces interfaces. And only need an OPC client or a server or some combination thereof to talk to each other. So the interfaces become more manageable, especially with the auto discovery. And the last point was something that happened to me recently. So in the old days, not that long ago, if you lost a physical connection, so I had an OPC server serving up data to a database, and in the classic days, if you lost that connection, you lost the data. And I never enabled anything, but when I had a UA server talking to a UA client, which was then stashing data away, I lost the connection, and when the connection was reestablished, boop, 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 all that data happened while it was down, was automatically filled in. It absolutely blew me away because I didn't enable it. I didn't try to do it. I wrote no code. It was just there. It just worked, and that was a very powerful thing, because if we had to deal with, whoops, lost my connection. Okay, start stashing this data away. Okay, connection's reestablished. Okay, try to figure out a way to get it through there without, and it was time consuming and complicated, and that's just gone. So that's a money saver right there. But the big takeaway there is why OPC-UA. You have the security. It's an acknowledged protocol, so it's reliable. Acknowledged meaning built in, yes, I got the message, I'm good, can move on. Manufacturer independent, so again, that non-proprietariness. Platform independent, not dependent on Windows. The big thing is it already exists. As we said, with the Internet, the Industrial Internet Consortium, they're just now getting started. There's nothing there. Some very powerful companies are involved with it, Cisco, Apple, IBM, but nothing's been done. Alan Bradley this summer announced that they were going to start working on device net of things. Again, start working. OPC UA has been around for 8 years now and doing fantastic things. There's been a couple of iterations, but it's been very, very stable, and it's solving all these problems. So some of us are a little puzzled why companies are trying to reinvent the wheel when we already have this thing that exists, that it's usable right now. So it's object-oriented. What do we mean by object-oriented? It's very simple. It's kind of a complicated, and people get a little unsure when we say object-oriented, which also, that's how the world works. That's how our phones work. That's how ATMs work. But for us, we see this address space. We see that tree structure that Scott showed us, and we drill down to get the information we need. That's really what it means to us. There's nothing complicated. It means I can get to the data in an easy way. There's object-like naming and access. And even if I have a device, I bring it into Beckhoff, or I bring it into InduSoft, I may get to it a slightly different way, but eventually I see that FB boiler 1, and there's the information. And it's going to be exactly the same, semantically the same on both sides. PLC Open released this year a set of function blocks to deal with the various OPC client and server needs. The two ones I find most interesting are UA, in red there, UA node get info and UA method call. Get info. Tell me what you are. Tell me what data you have. Tell me what I can access. And when you deploy a server, you feed it with those things. And rather than having to program this in, you go out and discover it. And that is an amazing way to go about things. The method call is a recent thing. And again, this is going to tie into the SOA, where I can call methods in other devices, not just locally, but remotely. The IT world calls it a remote procedure call. Very, very powerful mechanism, a subtle mechanism, but to be able to invoke behavior in another device is, again, how much of the web works right now. So service-oriented architecture, what does that mean? Well, the easiest way to describe this is right now, if I'm talking to MES, I have to now initiate it. Okay, I'd like to send you some data. Then I have to respond. Okay, here's the recipe data 1 and 2. Great. Okay, go and start production. Okay, I'm done. So we got all this traffic, which when we're dealing with 1 or 2 devices, not so bad. The world in 10 years is going to be very much different. There's going to be thousands of these things, and that is a problem. With method calls, with a service-oriented architecture, boom, new method call, here's your new recipe, okay, done, one shot, done. You don't have this back and forth, which you also have to write code to handle. And all this is done under the hood, and it's much easier to deal with. So it's one of those things that's subtle, but it's a big deal. This is an increase in efficiency, an absolute, 5-6-fold increase in efficiency alone, that alone. So again, the remote procedure call, the method call, is a powerful, powerful mechanism that's part of OPC UA that the IT world has used to great effect when we log into our bank and we make deposits and we make withdrawals. That's really what we're doing. We're invoking an RPC on the other end to do the shuffling. So these are techniques that the world has been using for years to great effect, and now we're going to start to see them in our world, in the industrial world. Okay, a little more information. So there is this book I talked about, this brochure, a fantastic introduction, high-level introduction, but gets down into some details. It talks about the different agencies and the academics and the end users and the vendors and small deployments, large deployments. SAP is in there. And you can contact opcfoundation.org to get this brochure, or feel free to contact Beckhoff or me at Beckhoff or Scott at InduSoft, and we can get this brochure to you. And highly recommend checking the OPC Foundation. They have a recently upgraded website that they worked very hard on. Videos, a lot of background information. We tried to hit the high-level stuff here, but there's a lot of groundwork, a lot of historical things that have gone on that have been covered before. So we wanted to talk, well, how does this fit into the world that we see changing in a very positive way, a very exciting way over the next few years. And PLC Open, which is an organization that tries to get people to do the same thing the same way, very similar to PAC-ML. I want state machines that I go to a machine and, oh, you're waiting for parts. You're in a holding pattern, and to try to find a commonality between things. And of course, Beckhoff, which is like InduSoft, been an early adopter of OPC, big fan of it, and really trying to steer people to using it in the best way in the best way possible. So I appreciate your time, and Scott, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Bob, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you for doing this with us. I know you got up early this morning to join us because you're a couple time zones ahead of most of us, and really appreciate that. And as I said on the webinar this morning, I learned a lot, and I learned some more stuff again this afternoon. I really think I like those function blocks that are now in the PLC Open stuff, the get the info. It really looks like you can do some things programmatically and on the fly and be very dynamic and understand what's going on while you're running. That offers some really interesting things.
That is true.
We did have a question come in. Bob, I'm going to take presentation status from you. This question's really for InduSoft. If we have any more questions coming in on the chat panel or the Q&A panel, I'll read those off to you, Bob, and I'm going to go ahead and mute you for the moment here. The question that came in was regarding InduSoft, and if you are configuring tags in InduSoft, but you don't have, let's say you don't have the PLC connected to your OPC server, what happens, or how can you do this and test, let's say? So what I'm going to do is bring InduSoft Web Studio back in, and hopefully for the person that asked this question, this will answer this. I'm going to move some things around here and make sure that I can see these questions. All right, there we go. So the question was, how can you work with this or simulate things if the OPC server is not online, or maybe you don't have the PLC connected to the other side? Well, in general, InduSoft Web Studio, let me open up the help system here, because this diagram is going to really show things in the best light here. If we take a look at this section called Internal Structure and Data Flow, and I scroll down a little bit here, this diagram here really shows you that the tags database, let me see if I can maximize this here. The tags database is kind of the central core, and everything communicates through the tags database, whether it's, in this case, the viewer, which is the screens, communicate to the tags, the database SPI, which I'll show you here in a second, and all of our OPC and drivers. communicate through that. So for example, if you happen to have an OPC UA client that's not communicating on the other side of it, those tags are still valid and whatnot. You'll be getting bad quality because the OPC client is reporting that. But let me show you how to handle that. Let me move this help system. You know what? Let me just close the help system out of the way here. And what you can do here is use this database spy window to communicate values. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this OPC UA connection that we made and this worksheet where I tied it to the temperature tag, and I'm going to put, now we can put a tag in here and disable and enable this worksheet on the fly, or I can put a constant. In this case, I'm just going to, while I'm testing, let's say, and I don't have the PLC, which is what the question was, I'm just going to put a 1 in there to disable this whole worksheet. I can fill out the whole worksheet and then just disable it, and it'll just sit there waiting until I turn that back on when I'm ready to go, when I have the PLC in hand. Now that that's disabled, I won't be communicating, like I just showed you in that help system, I won't be communicating to the OPC connection, if you will. And now what I can do to test is I can actually put values in this database spy. So let's say I wanted to use that temperature tag, and maybe I put in a value of 20,000 in here. And now when I run this project, you should be able to see, oh, there's that 20,000. Alternatively, I could come back in here into database spy and say, okay, let's make this 70,000. And you can see, hopefully you can see that back here as I got that going. Now let's say that you wanted to do some maybe internal simulations to test. A way that you can do that is you can enable this scheduler here. And the scheduler does things either based on time and date, which is the clock, which is the calendar. Then I would need the time field and optionally the date field. But I tend to, for this type of circumstance, I use the clock, which sets this time field up as a frequency or a period. In this case, the format here, when I use clock, it's the frequency. So I'm going to do hours, minutes, and seconds here. So I'm going to do hours, minutes, seconds. And I can even go down to the 10th of a second, but in this case, let's do 0.5, so every half second. Now, the way that this works is it's going to evaluate this expression and dump it into this tag. So what I want to do is just do some simulation, and what I might do is up here in this description, before I do that, let's, no, I don't want to create this tag. Let's fill this field out. And so it doesn't squawk at me. Let's go back up here and call this simulation. And I could disable this when I get my PLC and get running. But if I wanted to set up a way to say, okay, I want to take this value from, let's say, 10,000 to 10,100, let's say, I can put an if statement in here, which is our built-in scripting language, and say if temperature is less than 10,100, then what I want to do is take temperature and add 1 to it. Otherwise, I want to reset it back to 10,000. And what that'll do is it'll evaluate that every half second and dump that back into the tag called temperature, so we can get some little simulation going on here. I should be able to save this change, and hopefully I have my logic right there. I'll stop my project because I've made a reasonably substantial change to that, and get going here. So now you can see every half second I'm counting up, and we're not going to stay online long enough to see, but once this gets up to 10,100, it will start back at 10,000 again. So that's a way that you can configure and do some like internal simulations. And if I wanted to disable that line in that scheduler, I could. So hopefully that answers that question. If there's any other questions, feel free to put those into the chat panel. Here we go. Is there some system that could be used to bring the tag data into the OPC database so that IWS can browse the tags while the OPC is offline? I'm not sure that I understand the question, because if the OPC is offline, then we can't get to it. Maybe they're just trying to import the tags. I'm not sure if that's the question or not. There is a way that, for sure, within InduSoft Web Studio, if you have a list of items within the OPC server. Maybe you open up your OPC server configuration tool. You can copy those and paste those back into your OPC worksheet. So those could be just pasted right in here. Another way that you can do that is via Excel. So there's lots of different ways to do that. So we try to make these things compliant with normal copy and paste tools and things of that nature. And you can go the other way too. Let's say that I copy this and maybe I want to put that into an Excel spreadsheet. I could open up Excel here, paste this, and now I've got that format here. I could fill this out and then go back and copy this and then paste that back into InduSoft Web Studio. So hopefully that answers that question. There's a few different ways to be able to do that. So if the server itself is not online, then we can't browse it. But through some other copy and paste tools, maybe that's the answer to that question. Hopefully that answers that. And again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put those in the chat panel or the Q&A panel. I don't see any other ones coming in. Okay, good. That answered that question. So if there's no other questions, we're going to probably go ahead and end here pretty soon, but I wanted to show you we have some new InduSoft contact numbers for licensing and support, and so you can take a look at those. Those are also available on our website as well. You can get information, sales, and contact information from info@indusoft.com. You can always contact our support group at support@indusoft.com or any of these phone numbers as well. And once again, Bob, I'd really like to thank you. Let me get you off of mute here. I'd like to thank you for getting up early this morning and presenting. Again, I learned a lot, and with the comments I'm seeing coming in.
I appreciate it, and anytime. So there is a quick question there, if I can address that real quickly. Configuring a server in the CX, or really any PC, because that's just a PC, is an endpoint required if no security is required? The answer is no, but don't recommend it, because not only an endpoint also helps you with auto discovery. So there are many benefits to it, and for most people's implementations that I've seen of OPC, it's really not a big deal to configure the endpoint. So you can run it, kind of in a classic way without the endpoint, but you lose a lot of the benefits of DA or UA.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully that answers that question for that person. I think at this point we're getting close to the top of the hour. We've I think exhausted both of our presentations, and I don't see any more questions coming in. So, Bob, with that, I'm going to say thank you, and to our attendees, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your attendance. Don't forget to fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing, and let us know what else you'd like to see. And before we sign off, I want to bring up another quick point, something new we started doing recently. If you go to the InduSoft website and go here under marketing, we just started doing some podcasts. And this past week, a few of us, Bruce Hallenstein, myself, and Mr. John Dunlop, we were headed back from PAC Expo in the car, and we decided to do a podcast on what we saw at PAC Expo. So we're going to start doing some regular podcasts, and we'd like your ideas and suggestions on what you'd like to hear from us. This will be audio only, so you can put these on your phone, your tablet, and while you're on the treadmill or driving to and from work. But don't try to configure it while you're driving. Make sure you're in a parked condition. Feel free to listen to those and let us know. We'd like to know what you'd like to hear from us. So, again, Bob, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and sign off. And everybody have a great day.